like, I worked at the Coast Guard Chapel on base, so I was already, like, scared to do it because the chaplain was like, oh, you shouldn't mess with that. But then once I saw what you're about and how you help people, it wasn't, like, there was nothing crazy about it. If anything, it made me more religious, and it made me believe more, and it made me realize that there is life, like, that they don't just go away, that they're there and they're looking out for you. My grandfather had passed away the month before, and he came through. I mean, I was in the Coast Guard. He mentioned I was a lifesaver. He was Navy. I mean, he saluted me, and then I just lost it. I was like, this is so amazing.
I really believe she visited him.
He just wants you to know he knows how much you loved him.
And everybody in the room, their jaw just
knowing
dropped.
exactly what someone needs to hear.
That she called
You
me,
don't mind
but
if I take
nobody
my
really.
shoes off?
It was incredible. And then I was like, oh my God.
There's more after this life. This is Ripple Road.
Hello, welcome back to my podcast. This is episode 2 of Ripple Road, a story about me as a psychic medium. I always think I'm a little bit of a bird of a different feather when it comes to delivering messages, and I'm often left scratching my head trying to figure out how the heck it works for me, and basically how it doesn't work for me when it doesn't. That's always interesting. It's good to hear feedback from people too, so I like including these little snippets of people who've had readings with me over the years. I get to hear, how messages that I've given them have reached them, touched them, or have meaning for them. Usually when I give a message, I stay into this kind of daydreamy space in my head where I don't want to exit it and pay attention to the person because I feel like I'll lose the channel. So it's always nice to hear feedback afterwards from people who've had good readings with me, how it kind of clicked and made sense for them. That's nice.
You were talking to the one girl, and it was like you were telling her about her stuff, and then you had turned to my girlfriend, Angie, who I had gone, I ended up being like an add-on because somebody couldn't go. And they're like, hey, do you want to go? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll go. I'll come down from Maryland, no problem. And you had turned to my girlfriend, Angie, who I know was there to talk because she wanted to kind of have some closure with her dad. And your mannerisms, my God, they changed completely to his tone and his expression. And I knew 100%, like the hairs on my arm were standing up. I was like, I knew you were talking as for that. Like you were seeing whatever he was showing you, and you were, it was like amazing. And like I could see the tears building up in her eyes. I was getting teary because I was like, oh my God. There was a guy named Bill. You're like, there's a guy named Bill. He's in the Navy. Like you were like, but he choked. He died. He suffocated. And you were like looking at me. You're like, and I'm like, no, my grandpa died of throat cancer. It's not him. So. His name was William. I'm like, he was in the military, but I'm like, I don't know what branch he was in. And so you had turned to me and you were like saying, he's talking about, you're like, oh, he's talking about this guy. And you're like, oh, he's very full of charisma. And I was like, you're talking to my father. And you had said that my dad needed his legs checked, that my grandfather was saying how my dad get his legs checked. So, and then you were talking about, you were like saying he was showing you these cans and he was opening these cans. And you're like, I think they're sardines. And I'm like, and it was amazing because I've had that memory in my head for years, and I couldn't figure out if it was a dream and why I always think about cans with keys, like the little cans with the keys, and I couldn't figure out. And then you told me that he was showing you a little girl opening the cans with keys. So I had left there, and I was like, they wanted to go out and have drinks, and I said, look, I got to go home and talk to my parents. Like, I have to go talk to my dad. And Angie was like, she was shaking with hers, but she was like, she was happy with it. Because I had to go talk to my dad. So I went home, and the first thing I went in the house and said, my dad, how did Pop die? And my dad's like, throat cancer. I said, no. Did he pull a tube out of his throat and die? Like he choked and suffocated? And my dad's like, how do you know that? He's like, you were in second grade. We weren't going to tell you that his dad woke up there was no nurses or anything in there, and nobody there explained to him what happened. And he pulled the tube out, and he ended up actually dying from suffocating from not having air than actually from the throat cancer. And my dad was like, how do you know that? And I was like, because he told the psychic that tonight. I said, and you need to go get your legs checked. And that he said that you have to go do this. And my dad ended up getting stents placed in his legs because he wasn't having circulation to his legs. But as I'm telling my dad, I'm like, Pop-Pop was showing him something with like cans and keys. And my mom turns and she says, oh, you want some sardines? I have them in the cabinet. She's like, you used to open up the cans all the time because you thought it was funny playing with the keys. That your grandpa told you if you keep doing it, he was going to make you actually eat the sardines raw out of the can because that's what he used to do. And I was like, oh my God. So many things you had said. It was like I went home and everything was confirmed.
In the last episode, we left off where I was talking about the house that I grew up in, and it's about halfway through 6th grade, and, my dad would say that, it was like these crooks and these jerks, they took the house from him. Really, he just kind of came into some financial problems. He kind of lost the house, So, being a single dad and having me and my sister, he didn't really have much where else to go, so he moved in with his mother. So when we moved into her house in Paulsboro, as they say in Paulsboro, they call it Paulsboro. They have a South Jersey kind of accent there. Don't drink the water in Paulsboro, Paulsboro was a different type of town than where we came from. It was a rougher neighborhood. And I really started to kind of take to a sadness and depression about leaving, your childhood home, everything that you're familiar with, everything you grew up with.
You always want the good light and good energy. I even had a really bad message maybe like 5 years ago, and you worded it. So I figured it out on my own when it happened, and then I went, oh my gosh, that's what he was trying to tell me. But it's like you don't give bad negative energy. You kind of make it so the person, when they figure it out, they're like, oh, I get it. And I don't know if you mean to do that, but it makes it so much more like, oh my gosh, there's totally people looking out for me. You knew the month before I moved home that I was going to move home, and I was so depressed. And I had a long distance relationship here back home, and you were like, you're going to get a job with a gun, which anybody that knows me knows that I've been in law enforcement. You've told me that I've had a miscarriage and I was having a hard time getting pregnant, and you're like, oh no, you're going to have a little girl and you're going to name her, it's like a boy's name, but you make it girly, and her name's Ryan Marie. I knew it sounds crazy, but I knew I was going to have a daughter because of you. And I knew I was going to name her, I thought I was going to name her a different name. And then when I named her, I go, oh my gosh, this is what he said. Things like that, it's just crazy because I changed my mind about her name. And then I remembered you saying how I was going to name her. And then when I named her, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the name that he was talking about. But even my grandfather coming through, you get into it and you're laughing, you're having a conversation with somebody, and it's so cool to watch because you're like, oh, da, da. You always, I don't know, you just have a way of knowing exactly what someone needs to hear, if they're feeling bad. And it just kind of gives you hope.
I felt a lot less anxiety. One of the things I used to worry about a lot was death and people I love dying. And of course that's going to happen inevitably, but I guess just hearing about this and seeing other people, hear stories from their loved ones and just the certainty, wow, you really connected. It just, the fear of death and the fear of another dimension just dissipated. This isn't it. There's definitely something more.
The Paulsboro house itself had quite the history to it. It had been in the family for years. So when we moved in, there's already decades of history in this house. The house itself was actually a duplex. It was one of the bigger houses on the street. And why I bring this up is because just moving in there, that house was kind of spooky. When you would kind of barrel up those front steps there into the hallway, there was often a spooky vibe, like someone's up there looking at you. I don't know, going upstairs, it had this feeling to it like you were entering a portal into another dimension. You'd get up those stairs and, I don't know, it was like goosebumps all of a sudden. It was just a creepy vibe up there, And I'll tell you, later I find out, it wasn't just me. In my teen years, I started talking about this with other cousins and family members, and they all said the same thing. Oh yeah, I won't go up there alone. The only bathroom in that house was upstairs and all the way to the back, so you had to fly up the steps, go down the hallway, and get into that bathroom. Well, doing that at night, it was like, man, you put those blinders on the side of your head, you just kind of don't look, and you get down that hallway and close that door as fast as you can, because if you turn your head to look and that middle bedroom door is open. Oh, that's creepy, man.
Oh, I always felt the same way. Anytime you went up there, you knew you weren't alone. Just the overwhelming feeling of it being there, though, was incredible over there. You could feel somebody watching you, you know. I would go up there. When I was a kid, I was petrified to go up there. It would make your hair stand on end, you know.
And that's my cousin Ronnie. He grew up in that, Paulsboro house. It's my Aunt Madge's youngest son.
When that house was empty, I used to hear people walk up and down the hallway over there from this side. You could hear them going up and down the hallway like there was somebody over there, and there wasn't. But on this side of the house, there was a younger woman over here. Like, I haven't seen her in a long, long time. She was probably in her 30s. I remember her. She would call my name, and I remember going to the steps one time and looking down the steps, and she was at the bottom of the steps, and I saw her. She was standing right there, man. Like, whoa. I don't know where she came from, but she hasn't been here in a long time, but she was here continuously for a long, long time. You hear her walking up and down the hallway. Like, I would see her standing in the bedroom door staring at us. I don't know who she was, or I have no idea. She was a younger woman with black hair.
There's a lot of spooky things that have happened in that Paulsboro house. I don't know. It was just this empty feeling, you know. Nothing had been updated. My grandmother probably put that wallpaper on in the 40s or 50s. So it just had this air of like weird, otherworldly nostalgia, another time, almost empty feeling, you know. My grandmother just lived alone there. But on the other side of the duplex was her oldest daughter, my Aunt Madge. Maybe I'll let her tell the story.
Now, here's the thing that a lot of people don't really know. My father came and asked me, and I couldn't make up my mind. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but Uncle Rudy, he said, we'll do that, you know. My father wanted me to stay here because he always said he knew he was going to die when he was young. He always said that. He knew he was going to die when he was young. And he wanted me to be here with my mother. He said, you come in and you stay, and then you can have the house later. So that's what happened. A lot of people don't know that, you know, but he knew he was going to die when he was young. He knew that. And he wanted me to be here to take care of my mother and your dad, you know. That's how comes I'm here. I would not have been here otherwise because I didn't want to come back to Paulsboro. I really didn't want to come back here, and here I am.
The actual history of this Paulsboro house and how it became haunted is a pretty intriguing little mystery to my family. The house itself was actually moved. It had been situated along the Delaware River, and my grandfather, Lewis Henry, my grandmother's husband, he had a job there at the chemical plant. That all those houses there were built for the plant workers, you know, to live in. And eventually they were clearing out, making way for new industry. Eventually the oil companies moved into Paulsboro, and it was all a bunch of oil tanker fields. And they actually moved the house from the river up the street a bit. So, my Aunt Madge will tell the story about when she grew up. She remembered as a child growing up down near the river and how it used to be this beautiful house with a wooden porch.
So they moved the houses around 49 or 50. They moved all of our houses, and we had to move them. And they brought them right through Patterson Oil. That was Patterson Oil then. They brought them right through the tank farm. You believe that? Big old house like this to the double house. They moved it right through that tank farm.
And the thing about this house is at some point or another, so many people in my family have stories about growing up there, living there for a time. So I'll be darned if we could figure out who this ghost is in this house and where this creepy vibe came from. The only thing we can think in the family just talking about it is that side that we ended up moving into with my grandmother in the 80s. That was the side that the renters lived in. So I guess it's possible that somebody from back then, I mean, we're talking 1910s, 19-teens, possibly.
There's one thing about my house, though. This is strange. I don't know if anybody else has ever noticed it, but like I can sit in this house. I'm sitting in here. I actually hear people talking all the time, and it sounds like the television's on or the radio's on. And I'll even come down and look, and there's no television on. But I hear that all the time. I hear it at night. I hear it in daytime. It's just like people talking.
Here's the other possibility, though. So my grandfather, Lewis, his mother, they called Grandmom Henry, she was widowed. Her husband died in 1928, you know. And so she kind of lived with kids here and there with her own family, but eventually moved into that Paulsboro house and lived in that middle bedroom. And she had suffered a stroke and she had kind of mobility issues for a while. And she died in that middle bedroom. This would have been like in the 50s.
Now, I'll tell you something that is really weird. I don't know if you ever heard the term of the Banshees wailing. The night that my grandmother died, I heard that. Honest to God, yes. I was in the bathroom and I heard that. I thought, what? And I knew that she was gone. But here's what I didn't know. I read somewhere afterwards that it's the Banshees only wail when it's somebody of royalty that died. I didn't know that, but I read that since then, and I really should look that up more and see what. Because, back a long time ago, she could have been descended from somebody, those kings, they had kids by everybody,
This is also a good opportunity to talk about the family history and what other people are also psychic in my family, right? So these things started happening to me. I didn't really know too much about what was happening. It didn't really make sense. It was only after I started talking about the experiences that it started to come out that, oh, other people see that woman up there. Oh, yeah, when you go up the stairs and that, yeah, we all feel that. Oh, yeah, here's what happened to this person. Here's what happened to that person. And then I start to get all these stories. It's like, wow, okay. So how it works is that duplex there in Paulsboro, my Aunt Madge and Uncle Rudy lived on the other side of it. So me and my sister would, skate on over. You just open one front door, walk out on the porch, open the other front door, walk on into my Aunt Madge's. She never locked her door. Anybody could come in anytime. There was always people there. She was always cooking up something. There was always food. It was friends, it was neighbors, it was relatives. Always a crowd, always something to talk about. So I would always kind of sneak over there, And back there at the kitchen table, everybody would sit around and have coffee and cakes and just have dinner and all talk, So stories would come out about like somebody would have had some nightmare last night. Oh yeah, I was up till 2 a.m. and I could feel this thing in the doorway. And I used to eat these stories up like, oh my God, it's not just me.
So we have an Alexa, from Amazon. So my brother-in-law passed in July, and my niece said she was home alone. She's in Massachusetts, she lives with us there. And she said the Alexa came on and said, don't worry, I'm in the clouds and I'm doing fine. And she was like, I wasn't talking to Alexa. I was literally in the kitchen making toast, and Alexa came on from the dining room, and that's what she said. She's like, I'm pretty sure it was probably my dad, because she said she went into her room and, like, her remote, I think she said, like, her TV was turned on to something weird, and her remote was on her bed where she had put it on the dresser, and she said the remote was on the bed, and it was playing something like a spiritual thing. And she said, she was like, it's got to be my dad. And she's like, but the Alexa had done that. She said, I was so freaked out.
My Aunt Madge will tell a story about when her son Richard was younger. And I guess he was like maybe 20, 21, something out at the bars at the time. And it was getting later. And she thought to herself, okay, I'm going to send out a message to him, time to come home. And my cousin Richard tells the story. He says, I was sitting there at the bar having a drink. I wasn't paying attention to the time at all. And all of a sudden I hear my mother, time to come home. And I just stood up. I looked at my friend. I said, I got to go. And he said, why? I said, my mother's calling me. I got to go. And he went home. And that's the information that would pass telepathically between them. One time when he was much younger as a kid, she was getting ready for dinner, and she turned around, and he was setting the table, and she said, what are you doing, Richard? He said, you told me to set the table. And she goes, well, I didn't say that out loud. I was just thinking it. And he goes, well, I heard you like you said it out loud. So that's the kind of family that I come from, It's interesting to me to think, like, does this ability somehow get passed on through the generations? Is there something genetically in there? Like, could they look into my genome and code it all out and be like, oh, here, there's a mutation on your T51 thing. Like, how is there something to it? I don't know. Now, My grandmother, my dad's mom, didn't have it. She didn't have any abilities whatsoever. She just maybe a little superstitious, but she would never talk that way. That's not her style. But her mother, who we called Nanny, she died in 1962 or something, so before I was ever born. But the family talks about her and has stories about her. And here's my Aunt Madge telling a story about which would be her grandmother, who they called Nanny.
Oh, listen, she wore her corsets every day. Oh my God, yeah, she always was dressed up. Her hair was always nice. She always looked like a lady, you know. Well, she was very, very smart lady too about people, and that's where you get a lot of your abilities, because she was pretty good that way. And what was funny is that she knew who else was like that. My cousin Jimmy was my Aunt Mary's son. Nanny raised him. He lived with Nanny, and so he lost his ring on the beach in Wildwood, and he came home and told Nanny, and she said, okay, and she went to bed, and then she got up in the morning. She said, then Mom, when you go down the beach, she told him exactly where to go. Don't you know that he went down there and picked his ring up off that goddamn Wildwood beach? Can you believe that? I mean, that's really unbelievable. I know. And she told him exactly where to go to pick his ring up, and he did. She told me, I went over there that one day, and she said to me, she was staying over her house. She said, Madeline, I want to tell you something. There's a ghost walks up and down the hall here. And I said, oh, no, man. Yes, there is, and I don't want you to tell your mother. I said, okay. Don't tell your mother. I said, just tell me, but don't tell your mother, you know.
So I know that my nanny, my great-grandmother, had abilities of some sort. And it's interesting to look through my genealogy and my family tree to find other people. Like Nanny had, I don't even know, 13 kids or something, right? My grandmother was one of a lot. And then they all had kids and they had kids. So my Aunt Joan, when she passed away, we were at the funeral service for her. And some guy comes up to me. I never even knew who he was. Some cousin, some distant relative. I guess he was cousins of my Aunt Joan, so they stayed in touch. But he comes up and he says, so you're the medium, huh? And you never know how that's going to go in a conversation. God, I hate this. I kind of tense up, you know. And he goes, I used to have it too when I was younger. And then something happened around 17, 18. I decided I wanted to close it off and I wanted to be done with it. And he's like, now he's in his, 70s. And he says, I think about it a lot and I wonder how to get that back and I don't know. I don't even know who this guy was. It was like some random third cousin. So it's weird how it runs in the family. There's got to be something to this like genetic information being passed along, you know?
When I was a kid, I always told my mom, I said, I can't, I guess she thought I was nuts. She took me to a psychiatrist. When I was a little kid, I said, Mom, I hear people all the time talking to me. I can't concentrate. And it's like when I was like in 4th or 5th grade. They drive me insane. I hear them. And the more I ignore them, the louder they get. And, of course, it was, to me, I didn't know what it was. I just heard everybody like hollering, like, trying to get my attention, and it drove me insane. It got to the point where it was just, I was being bombarded when I was a kid. You know what I mean? And then eventually I actually learned to ignore the hell. I couldn't concentrate. And I think I learned to block it out to the point I'm aware of it, but I could totally ignore it.
My cousin Ronnie had a blacksmith shop, and he was working with a couple of guys, making iron gates and all these kinds of heavy metal projects for construction companies and stuff. And they got this anvil. It was really old because the nub of it had been worn down. And ever since they got it, him and his friends there at the blacksmith shop all started seeing like this fuzzy black figure out of the corner of their eye. It was like a presence. So we were talking about it. He's like, man, you got to come down sometime and see if you get a read on it. I thought, all right, cool. So I happened to go down, and my cousin Richard was there too. And I started feeling out this anvil, thinking, like, man, this is like from the 1700s or something. This goes back a long ways. And I'm feeling like the guy that owned it was really queasy. He's like sick in the stomach. And my cousin Richard goes, yeah, it was on a ship. And I'm like, how you know that? And he's like, you can't feel that? I'm like, I didn't pick up the ship thing. And he's like, what he would do is ships would come up the river here, and they would port, and they would need chains to be worked on or whatever. So he'd carry his anvil. He's like, that anvil was prized. That was his, like, he needed that to make a living, to put food on the table. And he would carry it on board this ship, and that's how he would get paid. But ended up like dying at sea or something. It was like somehow it came back to port, they offloaded, and there's the anvil. And it ended up through the centuries in my cousin Ronnie's blacksmith shop with this guy who's so attached to it because it was his way of life. What's weird about it is I was picking up bits and pieces of it. You know, I'm not really as good at reading objects, but my cousin Richard read that anvil spot on. He had all kinds of details. So I know he's got the ability. He just doesn't talk about it. What's interesting is the people in the family who seem to have psychic abilities all have time spent in that Paulsboro house. They're the ones with all the crazy ghost stories, paranormal happenings, nightmares, waking up in the night, seeing visions, hallucinating, hearing voices, feeling somebody touching you, all this stuff. All those stories come from that side of the family, and that's the side of the family that also had grown up in that freaky house, man. So, is there something to be said about haunted houses? I'll tell you today, as a medium, I never talk about that stuff. I don't ever go into, hey man, your house is haunted. I should bring in the night vision goggles and some electromagnetic recording instruments and get out of here with that. I don't want anything to do with it. Next episode, you're going to hear about all the nightmares and the really bad, dark stuff, and you'll realize why I don't want anything to do with that stuff, It's a power of the mind, just like I was talking about before. The power of your mind to make things real is crazy. If you want to look at ghosts and paranormal things and freak yourself out, you will find that stuff. It goes off into some really weird alternate reality, psychosis type stuff. Do you want to go down that rabbit hole, or do you want to stay focused on the physical world and how you can help people with your abilities? Yeah, I want to do that. Yeah, that's what I want to do. So if I ever went into a house today as a medium and I was like, all right, I'm going to do a reading here, and I feel like there's someone, over in the corner staring at me that doesn't want me here, I'll be like, yeah, I think we need to go to another house to do your reading. There's like a dude over there that I don't know if I should be here. I've actually done that numerous times. I just, I'm good. Let's go to the place where we can surround it with love and light and bring through the angels, and my little freaky medium mind can take control of the room and bring through and generate a positive experience. Yes, that's what I want.
Yeah, there was a lot of noise around, and you couldn't get through to a reading, and my father-in-law came through and told us that we need to go across the street to their home, and you sat in the same exact spot as that he passed away, and then you were able to give a reading.
I don't know. It's like different strokes for different folks, and the filter of your own personality and your own library of experiences kind of dictate what experience you have with your abilities as a psychic, as a medium. It's like with me, right? I guess not really happy to admit this, but, I was a smoker for a very long time, and I still smoke occasional cigars. And when I'm channeling someone in spirit, they can kind of feel that energy through me. And I will always pick up on the person who in their life was a smoker. I'll be like, who's your grandfather? Wait, was he a smoker? No, who's Frank? Is that your grandfather's brother? Oh, yeah, my Uncle Frank, but I don't know why he'd come through. Boy, he really wants a cigarette. What was he smoking? Camel cigarettes? Oh, yeah, I heard that. Yeah. Why would he come through? Because I'm a smoker and he's a smoker and I found him. I don't know, man. Like attracts like. So that's part of the how do you program your brain? How do you set intentions? I don't want to go to like the lower astral realm or there's earthbound spirits or, I don't even really necessarily believe in that anymore. I feel like that's the next level of programming your brain when you don't even believe it to be true, really. It's like if I encountered it, I would change that belief and be like, all right, I'm going to temporarily visit the reality where that's a thing. Cool. And then I'm going to return to the reality where I absolutely believe 100% that that's not a thing. And I'm able to like switch realities in my brain. And now I live in this reality where the ghost thing is not real. And that's where I'm going to be. And it helps me so much to keep it in this angelic, healing light. So helpful. Thinking about these houses, it's like, is there a spirit attachment to the actual house? I mean, that Paulsboro house was physically moved, 10 blocks up the street. Did it have a ghost from before? I don't know. It's really bizarre, right? And then why is it so centralized only upstairs and only in these certain bedrooms? Yeah, I don't know. It's very strange, Which is why I think it's more of an echo of their personality than the actual spirit themselves. And here's why. You ever hear of like ghosts going through doors and like they're doing things like, my cousin Terry said, brushing her hair at the vanity and all this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, because that vanity in that room was probably from the 1930s and it hasn't been moved since in my grandmom's house, But as houses change and get remodeled, it's like there could have been a doorway over here to the dining room that then we closed off and we opened up this other wall, so it kind of changed the footpath of the house. And now, 20 years later, people are moving in and they're seeing a ghost go through this wall. And I'm thinking, the ghost isn't going through a wall because in the ghost's mind, there's still a doorway there. That's where the door is, because the ghost is just a shell of a personality. It hasn't been fed any new information because its spiritual consciousness, its seat of awareness, hasn't inhabited that echo, hasn't been in that shell, hasn't actually looked around and opened its spiritual eyes to see all the new changes. It's just running an old computer program that's never been updated. So it's going through the wall because it thinks there's a door there still. That kind of feeds into my theory that they're not really earthbound, trapped in purgatory. I think it's just an echo, an astral debris of their persona when they were living, and they've graduated beyond that to this other heavenly place. Most people would be able to absorb all of that information and their identity after they die, and the whole thing kind of ascends and disintegrates, and it's you become kind of this new awareness in heaven. I guess for some other people, their experiences were so tied in with places that their astral identity, that kind of lower consciousness and personality, gets like entangled in the molecules and the floorboards and the walls and the furniture and the carpets, and it's there. I just don't myself acclimate to reading objects. My cousins can. I just don't. I guess I can too, but I'm just not of the disposition that I want to try it too often,
Looking back on that reading, somebody at that reading was a skeptic, and her grandfather had recently passed, and she snuck into the reading something. I think I want to say it was her grandfather's hat. She said, I'm only going to believe in this, if my person comes through first, and Scott picks up on that, then I'll believe it to be the real deal. It's funny because she wasn't the first person to come through, but you made a comment. You said, who here has something from a deceased grandparent? It's like a baseball cap or something like that. And she actually had that hidden behind the pillow on her chair.
It's almost like when I think about an earthbound spirit, are they truly locked into this purgatory space? I've come to not really believe in that anymore. So is it just like an astral record? Is it an echo of your persona? I kind of believe that. That's where my mind goes lately. It certainly feels like a real person. It feels like you're being stared at. But maybe, just maybe, it's only the actual conscious entity of a person that passed away inhabiting the vehicle of their earthly persona in the moments when you're physically walking into that space. Something triggers that astral echo that there's another conscious being entering my space, like an animal in the forest can sense when there's a predator nearby. it triggers it. So like the seed of their awareness returns into that frequency, like out of habit, like the hair standing up, like there's something here, and gets very protective and defensive. It makes you wonder, because I've done a lot of readings in the past where I can say, oh, well, there is a spirit of someone here connected to the house. I won't go there automatically. I won't find it in a reading. You have to ask me to leave my normal mode of doing a reading, which is to kind of connect the energetic switchboard that I'm feeling between you and those in spirit, your emotions, your experiences, your personality, and those in spirit. Now you're asking me to connect instead to the energy of the house and the remnants and the echoes and the psychic debris of the house. I wouldn't normally go there. I'm not programmed to think that way. But if you ask me to, and many people have, I find it. There it is, and I can talk about it. It's hard to validate, right? I could say, look, there's this guy who's only coming through in the back kitchen and a little bit outside because there was part of the kitchen that used to be there and burned down, and then they can verify that. Well, yeah, it did. It burned down in the 70s. That's interesting.
So I have a friend, and her father was a truck driver, okay? And he had driven a truck his whole life. And one time when you were in a very deep trance, you were just you just said out of nowhere, whose wife drives the truck? Her mother was in the reading too. And she said, that's my ex-husband, but we were married for 40 years. And my friend said, yeah, that's my father. And it was, you were almost in this trance where you were just going, you couldn't stop yourself. And he said, he died. But it's not a car accident, but he died. And all of a sudden, everybody was so shocked out of nowhere, and you just moved away from it. You kind of refused to go back to it. Anyhow, a couple months later, her father was found dead in the back of the truck. He'd had some kind of a heart attack in the truck, but it was not a truck accident.
I get a little suspicious every time I hear a medium that goes into a house and there's a little girl here in a white dress from the 1800s. I feel like it plays up on people's fears and stereotypes of the afterlife and suspicions. And can we get some ghosts that were hey, there's a cokehead from the late 70s wearing some bell-bottoms. Where's that guy?
Out at the farm, I had a kid out there, a little boy, all right? And I used to see him all the time, and he wasn't he must have died back in the 70s because he always wore, he had clothes on, from the 70s, right? And I was sitting in the living room one day, and I hear the back door open, and I hear, hey, Twinkle, hey, Bandit, and here's the dog standing there begging, sitting up begging, and there was nobody there. It was that boy, right? And I figured nobody's ever going to see this kid. And then Kelly's nephew came over with one of his friends, and the one kid goes, who's that little kid out in your yard? You know what I mean? He saw him playing his day, that kid. That little boy, he was conscious of everybody being there. And I don't know, where the kid came from, or, there's no reason I knew the history of the house, there's no reason for that boy to be there.
I was actually called out one time to do a reading. It was an hour drive over into Pennsylvania, and I get over there, and I walk up, and the people are getting out of their car, and I'm like, oh, just in time? And they're like, yeah, another car pulls up, and it's a realtor. Here, the couple hired me to come and do a reading on a potential house they were going to buy. They had to schedule it with the realtor. Didn't tell me any of this. I'm thinking I'm going to, channel your relatives like I normally do, cause all the love and light and healing. And I'm like, guys, this isn't really what I normally do. Did you check out my information? Because I kind of don't do this. And they're like, no, this is really important. You came highly recommended. I'm like, okay. So we're walking through the house, and now, here I am on the spot. The realtor's there. Everyone's there. You got to perform, right? Okay, fine. Let's plug in. Let's look at the house. And it's interesting because it's I'm proving to myself I actually can do this, even though I don't really ever want to do this. But I started finding stuff. I started feeling which stairway was the more haunted one. I'm going to tell you, if you're not sensitive to it, fine. But I wouldn't want to live here. And if you guys were thinking of having kids and raising a family, I would advise strongly against buying this house. The realtor's like, shit. I don't think it was her listing, though. I think she was okay with it. She had other houses to show. But anyway, I can do it. I just don't like doing it, you know? When people call me and ask, like, can I come out to a haunted house and clear it? I'm like, you got the wrong business card on hand, Buster Douglas. That ain't happening, man. I ain't coming out there. Are you crazy? I'm going to end up carrying it home with me, and I'll end up being, like, haunted at night. I don't know. Probably not, but I ain't taking no chances, man. Why would I? Are you crazy? I like the phone calls where people are like, Scott, I got your number from a friend. We got this house, and ever since we moved in, my son's been having awful nightmares, and there's this evil thing that stares at me. I keep waking up and seeing red eyes in my bedroom window. Can you come over here, please? I'm like, I'm going to give you the number of somebody, but, like, don't call me again. There's some other psychic, there's some other medium or energy worker out there that can handle that stuff. Go for it. Knock yourself out, Charlie. I don't care, man. It's not my thing. So, yeah.
So we were at somebody else's house for a reading. I showed up, which I've never had an issue with you reading me or my family. We've really never had an issue. But this time it just wouldn't work. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go. And I went, and you were able to read. Everybody. Turned out my ex had stuck a pentagram thing in my pocket. And I had no idea, you know, but sure enough, it was just not good energy and unable to read through that. It was just bad energy. And I did not know this, but sure enough, I left the reading and everything was fine.
Eventually, when we moved out of that Paulsboro house, my Aunt Madge's daughter, my cousin Terry, moved into that side of the house, and she would talk about, you know, that ghost is still here. And anytime where there'd be like a party or something, and my dad and I would come back and hang out, she would always say, you know, whenever your dad's here, that ghost always seems to act up more. I'm like, yeah, you'd think it always acted up when I was around too. Great. But many years later, when I started doing readings full time, she had hired me to come and do a reading, and I thought, cool, now that I've kind of got my chops and I've learned a little bit more about how it works, this will be interesting because I can open up there and maybe I can get my own people. I can get grandparents, great-grandparents. This is kind of cool for me as a medium because I can't do it on my own. If I tried to open up and get those messages to come through for just me, it's more challenging, it's difficult. But if I can sit with somebody and bring through messages for them, you know, connect this conduit between spirit, me, and the person, have a result with the person that hears the messages, then I can be an observer and listen to the messages. And if they're my own family that I'm bringing through, I'm totally going to listen and observe and be like, oh, awesome. That's my great so-and-so, you know? That's very cool. So I would go over to my cousin Terry's where she lived, you know, it was like where my grandmother used to live on that side. And I would do readings. And I did this, you know, maybe once a year or so for a few years. And there was this one time where I started really bringing through some people from way back in the day when my grandmother was young, and it was like all these different names of people, and some of them she could verify, you know, it's like people I didn't even know, but my Aunt Madge has got like a great memory. That's my cousin Terry's mother. So she would all, you know, compare notes and be able to verify stuff from these readings. After that reading, when I brought through people from way back when, Terry told me, yeah, that ghost, she left. She's not here. She must have seen somebody coming through that reading that day and recognized them and went away with them. What a weird thing. But this is kind of how my family talks. Maybe they don't talk to strangers that way, but they talk to me that way, which is nice to have other people in your family and in your life who talk spiritually, so I don't sound like such a freak, you know? That's kind of nice. But that's the end story of that ghost there in the Paulsboro house. Is apparently it went away after I did this mediumship session there in the house.
So you had told me that there was a ghost that follows me, that I had miscarried a baby and I was in the hospital, and that he saw my aura and decided he liked me. So he would follow me. He would turn lights on, he would turn toys on, but then he couldn't turn things off. So there was a light in our kitchen, that was always on. It had a dimmer, but it had a lift, like a ledge. You had to get it pushed down over. So if you didn't, the filament would always be on. And I would yell at my husband all the time, like, you need to turn this off. And he's like, it's not me. And I'm like, well, the kids are too small. They can't even reach the light switch, so it's not them. And you're the only other person in the house. So who's doing it if it's not me? And so you were like, the ghost said, he told me to tell you that it's his fault. He's doing it. And I said, well, does he have a name? I called Joe. And you were like, he doesn't want to tell me his name. But since he can touch the physical plane, if you ask him his name, I'm sure he'll tell you. So I think about a month went by and still weird things were happening. Well, the one day I came home and the light bulb was on. And I said, hey, Joe, I said, you turn the light on again? And then the light went up, turned up brighter. And I was like, so you're here. And then it kind of flickered. And I was like, do you want to tell me your name today? And my daughters had these freaking little people, and they were in a box. I turned them all off because I hate they would come on randomly. And all of a sudden you hear, hi, I'm Dr. Doug. And I was like, is your name Doug? And then it came on again. Hi, I'm Dr. Doug. I said, if your name is definitely Doug, and you want me to call you that from now on, turn the light off. And turn the light off. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, all right, so your name is no longer Joe. You're now Doug. I was in a car accident in 2019, February 1st. I was coming down the street. A young guy was coming off a side road. I was on a one-way street. It was snowing. And this kid was coming down. He was doing like 40 and a 25. And he thought he was going to just flip through the stop sign. But unfortunately, I was there. The moment before the kid hit me, I felt like there was someone in the back of my car. And I saw a man in my rearview mirror. And I looked back and I slowed down. The kid had I not slowed down, this kid would have probably killed me because he totaled my car and spun me out. They thought I broke my neck and everything. I don't know if there's a way that you can help somebody else out by giving away your whatever being you are here. I don't know. I haven't felt Doug since.
One of the things that stands out from that time, my dad was going through all these different job changes and financial issues. And at one point he was an insurance salesman. So I remember him having these file cabinets with all these different clients, and he would go make house calls, and sometimes I would be, on the drive with him to the place, and he'd have these positive thinking tapes, It was like how to program your head, how to like make that sale, don't take no for an answer, find your way to yes, there's all these sales tactics. So I remember being a kid driving around listening to these tapes, it was like Dale Carnegie or Zig Ziglar, Norman Vincent Peale. It's all about this power of positive thinking. And you're just going to come in with this positive, optimistic spirit that's going to have an answer for everything, that's never going to be caught off guard. And you're going to come off as friendly and informative, and you're going to get to that yes. You're going to get them to sign that night on this paper, and you're going to walk out with that sale. And it was all this like encouragement stuff. But what really rubbed off on me were all those power of positive thinking messages, It would be like a 10 cassette tape bundle. Dale Carnegie will walk you through, understanding the higher self and all these things, So it kind of got programmed into my subconscious. It's always stuck with me.
This was the first time that I actually ever, did a psychic session like this. I was actually on the skeptical side. So I did it, and you came in that night with this really positive attitude, very open person, very positive attitude. You came into the house, and I felt totally confident, and we went into the room after talking for a little bit, and you started meditating, and I could visibly see at that point that you transcended into something else, right? Your eyes seemed like they were getting heavier, maybe glazed over. I think it took about maybe 5-10 minutes, maybe even longer. And we were just sitting there quiet in the room, and, we watched you meditate on that chair. There was just like this serene silence at that point. And you started going around the room and started, touching on each different person in the room, and you came around to me. And when you got to me, you started talking about my personality. You talked about how I view things from a hawk's eye perspective, viewing things from the top down, from the way that I would take notes with my abbreviations to having everything on a one page. So that resonated with me immediately. And you talked about other things relative to my life. You talked about my son and a lot of personal stuff. It was just spot on, and everything, the conversation was going really smooth, and, I really appreciated it.
One of the things that sticks out from those tapes is this idea that you can program your mind and program reality. That was a really cool concept, that you could say these things and repeat it to yourself, and it will manifest in reality. It will become reality. And, oh man, I used to get so jazzed listening to these things like, yeah, like, all right, I'm going to go home and be like, I do have a girlfriend. Because that's what you want when you're like 14 years old, Oh, goodness. It didn't work. It did not work. I must have been focused on the lack. A lot of loneliness there. Oh, you want loneliness? Here, have some more loneliness. Thanks, universe. Appreciate it. But anyway, it never stopped me from trying. And it stuck with me over the years,
Even as something as when my mother was sick and really in the point of transitioning, like passing away, you had even questioned, you had thought she had already passed. And I was like, oh, no, she didn't. But, we understand what point we're at. And you were like, I just want to let you know she's going to pass quicker than you expect, which was, again, a dead on ringer that we didn't know she was going to pass the next week. Like, those things stick out to me because it was so raw and real, but it also, attributes to your ability to have these sense of things. Your delivery on something even like that was so compassionate, and it wasn't like anything that broke me down, but it was okay.
The week before a reading, my grandfather had passed, and fairly recently, and through this whole week, I kept looking up at the moon and thinking about him. And I go to this reading, and it was a multiple person reading, and you were like, yeah, your pop-up, he looks down when you look at the moon. He looks down at you, and he knows that you're thinking of him. And I just thought that was the coolest thing.
So I think about the nature of our reality and how it ties in with our brain. There's actually a story happening right now in your head. Your brain is repeating something right now. You just don't realize it. It's happening on another level. It's in the back of your mind, and reality is responding to it. There will always be a phrase, a story, a belief, a feeling in the back of your mind that your reality is building because of that. It's because of the thinking, the feeling that's going on unconsciously in your brain right now. That's why your life is the way it is. It's the same way with you. This is what I mean. You have a story that you absorbed when you were younger that's running in the back of your mind right now. Have you ever tried to take conscious control over it? And by that, I mean, step one is acknowledging it. You have to listen to that voice in your head that when you go out to your car and you're driving down the road and you're like, oh man, look at that nicer car. What happens in your mind? Are you like, that jackass, why you need a Mercedes? You don't. Why you need that nice Cadillac? You don't. Or are you like, that's going to be me one day. I'm going to afford that. I'm going to get that. Or are you like, I'm good right now. I'm so good, I'll bet I'll get that Cadillac because I'm so good right now. Because you believe it, because you know it, right? And that's part of that acknowledging it as step one, to then step two, break it apart, man. Break apart that story and start a new story. But it's not just your thoughts, it's the feeling. You got to get into the feeling place that you're doing great, that you're in gratitude, that you're thankful, that you feel abundant, right?
Well, my meeting with you at the fire hall was so impressive. I was with my husband for 25 years, and he was very depressed over traumatic life experiences, and unfortunately he died from chronic and acute alcohol abuse. I felt numb, like for every occasion. I wasn't happy. It just felt like I was dragging myself around and not experiencing life anymore. So I went to your meeting, and you went around to all of the people, and as it was a 2-hour session. There was somebody in the back of the room doing an Irish jig. As you went around the room, several times you kept talking about this person doing the Irish jig. And I thought to myself, well, my husband, he was from Ireland, and he would do the Irish jig at home all the time for me and my children to make us laugh. As you read, everybody started to come towards my area, and so you pulled the chair from in front of me and turned it around and sat down, and then you looked at me, and it looked like a wall of sadness seemed to come over you, and tears started to fall from your eyes as you spoke to me. And it felt like it actually felt like I was speaking to my husband himself. And I was totally shocked. This is the first time you sat and the only time. And for you to pull the chair around and face me as if it was my husband, it just felt so personal and like it was really heartfelt from him. I mean, you weren't even actually there at that moment. I don't know why I felt like it felt like you were a vessel and he was actually speaking to me. You knew that he died suddenly and it was unexpected, and you knew that he smoked heavily. My husband he was from Ireland, and he would roll his own tobacco, and he stunk so bad like cigarettes that I would make him take his clothes off before he came in the bedroom. And you said that there was a big dog around him, a big furry dog. And yeah, his dog Russ, he loved him. He talked about him all the time and would tell me dog stories. My sister came with me to the reading. She's my younger sister. I gave her his car because she didn't have one at that time. And you knew that the car didn't have a horn, and you couldn't roll down the driver's side window. And my sister was so surprised that you knew that. And then you said that he said that my sister was a pain in his ass. It is so true, though. They argued constantly. You said that he felt much happier where he was, and he felt relieved, and that he had hoped, I could feel the same way. And your reading helped me to do that, because I actually got to speak with him, and we had, it was so unresolved that he just died so suddenly like that. And you told me that he didn't want me to blame myself for any of this. And I did blame myself. I was so happy. It felt like bricks and concrete and everything heavy. The whole weight of the world had been lifted from me, and it literally changed my life.
I don't like talking about darkness and negativity and the paranormal. Everyone's already kind of suspicious enough of me as a medium, and I'm aware of it. I could feel it. I know you are. So I try to become a nice person. I try to put other needs first. I try to help other people. Would I have become this way if I didn't go through those years? I don't know. See, everything happens for a reason. So I really try to skirt away from that. People that are like, oh, you're a medium. Do you go to cemeteries? No. Oh, you're a medium. What do you talk to ghosts? No. I really struggle with this, so I don't enjoy talking about it. So guess what we're going to do next? Talk about it. Going in for a deep dive on episode 3. So follow me into it. It's going to get a little creepy and scary, but after that, you're going to take a little journey into the light with me. And then it'll make sense why I don't go dabbling with witchcraft and why I don't like Ouija boards and all this kind of stuff, Anyway, that's coming up next. So thanks again for listening. Have a wonderful day. Be cool.